kind of aggressive behavior towards neighbors, towards the region, towards the international order. So I would say that any post-Russia that is worth dreaming of or fighting for has to be one where human rights are not just respected, but where they form the cornerstone of the new states that emerge on the ashes of this empire. But what does it mean concretely for indigenous peoples living in today's Russia? First of all, those future states have to explicitly recognize the right to self-determination of their indigenous peoples in line with international norms. These states will have to explicitly endorse the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and I would like also them to ratify the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. In other words, everything that Russia has not done and probably will not do also in the future. In this context, it is very interesting to actually see that Russia's mainstream opposition does not really pay much attention to human rights, to put it mildly, echoing what Aruna said about Julia Navalny's recent speech in Slovenia. So she did somehow ask or recommend that the democratic world would support Russian human rights defenders. I guess by that she meant to offer them refuge in Europe and offer them resources to do their work. But she didn't really say anything about the future Russia having to respect human rights as such, human rights of individuals, human rights of its indigenous peoples. Because otherwise, I don't think she would have made this statement against Russia's decolonization and against the so-called decolonists. Because what is decolonization after all? Fundamentally, it's a human rights project. It's a project to allow eventually all peoples, including indigenous peoples, to exercise their right to self-determination, to freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social and cultural development, to quote the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But this seems to be precisely what Julia Navalny opposes. It is something that the democratic world, the West, the EU, actually that has been feeding these very oppositioners should seriously reflect on whom are they really supporting. And coming to Taiwan, and also given the proximity of PRC here, I again agree with Arunas that there seem to be a lot of similarities between today's Russian Federation and PRC. And in terms of the human rights regime in particular. Now, unlike Russia, PRC has endorsed the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but it doesn't recognize the existence of any indigenous peoples on its territory, which of course is extremely hypocritical. And the genocide of Uyghurs, I would argue, is a consequence of this. You fundamentally disrespect collective rights of your peoples, and then it is no surprise that it ends up in some kind of violence. And this is something that the democratic world should not accept. Not only maybe should it tackle the symptoms of this, but also the root causes. So this forum is called the Forum of Free Nations of Post-Russia. I don't know, maybe there is also a need to have a parallel Free Nations Forum of Post-China. And in fact there are many oppressed peoples in China. Maybe Taiwan as a free and democratic country, which I personally do not consider China. I think it's something separate, despite its formal name, Republic of China. But maybe Taiwan has a role in this, but this is a question for Taiwanese people and colleagues here. But to summarize, any decolonial processes in Russia, I think may have also in the future some impact on China. We will see how that goes. But even more importantly, any new collective security architecture, if it were to succeed and be sustainable, must put human rights, including the rights of indigenous peoples, at the forefront. And decolonization of Russia is, in my view, an effort to make this happen. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Oliver. Over to Kazuhiro.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kazuhiro Ito. I came from Japan. I wasn't actually